We've saved a seat just for you. There's always room at the table. It's Coffee with the Pastor with your host, Andy McDaniel.
Welcome, everybody, to Coffee with the Pastor. It is always a pleasure to be with you. Look forward to another great show today as we're going to just talk about some things in life that hopefully will be of relevance to you and maybe of some encouragement and some maybe even some challenge as we're going to look at this through the lens of Scripture and a little bit of a deep conversation today about some things that are just kind of on my heart. And again, we come with you and are encouraged that you join us each and every Monday as we're here just to lift each other up. That's what this whole thing's about, friends. You know, it's a journey, and we all go through different parts in life, and some are good and some are not good. And we have to be honest about that. And I think lifting each other up, especially in these days that we're in right now, is so important. I am your host, Pastor Andy. Great to be with you again. I have the honor of serving the Lord here in our local community in Fayetteville, North Carolina, over at West Fayetteville Baptist Church. If you'd like to learn more about us or what we do in the ministry that I have there, wfaybc.net is where you can get all that information. So we're glad to be back with you again today, and I'm excited to have my friend Pastor John Murphy back with us. How are you, man?
Good. Yeah, good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while. So how you been? Yeah. What, you catch any fish or do anything exciting this summer?
Yeah, we summer's wrapping up, but we did a big family cruise.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's my oldest, his last year at home. He's headed off to college, and it was our 20th anniversary this year.
Yeah, we got one of those coming up in September.
Yeah.
We're gonna do the cruise deal.
Yeah, that's great. We had a really good time.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun. We went to the Eastern Caribbean.
Okay, yeah. My girls want to go to Jamaica. So
yeah.
That's where, so yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
A lot of fun. Lots of food.
Oh, yeah. It's always too much food.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But that's okay. It's a good thing. Well, man, thanks for being here. It's good. How's things at Frontline? We're all doing well there?
Yeah, they're going well. Yep,
that's great.
Going well.
That's great, yeah.
Yep. We're, coming through the summer and talking with an architect right now about expansion. We're running out of space there, which
that's
is
a great problem to have.
That's right. It is a good one.
It really is. That's good. Well, man, I want to talk about something important today. You know, of course, the Lord himself said that when he was challenged on the greatest command in the law, and of course, they were looking for something very, very different than what he said. Yeah. And he said, love God and love one another.
Yeah.
Now, I would say the majority of bodies of believers across the world, they're drawn to that statement. It's sometimes even part of their faith statement. And why is that difficult?
Yeah.
I want to talk about that today because
right.
While the hearing of it is certainly beautiful, but the application of it seems to be a strain because we allow our differences, whether it's doctrinally or denominationally or this, it does get in the way because we're still human. And I want to kind of talk about that just a little bit, the struggle of truly understanding, and I want to look at both components of that. To love God, some people really wrestle with that, even though we know what he's done for us. You know, again, Jesus said clearly, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. What's going on with that? Where if we could find a central argument, I guess, in that, where's our struggle?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's in our humanity. You know, you said it earlier. It's we've got to acknowledge that we're human, and the Bible is going to say, I mean, it's difficult for us, but that we're born spiritually dead, spiritually blind, and so we're not born neutral to God. We're born spiritually dead. Ephesians 2:1-5 is really clear about that, and someone who's spiritually dead can't love God. You know, and then even after God rescues us and we respond to the gospel and, realize that all of these other loves that our hearts are aimed at are only going to be satisfied in God. Even in that, I love how Paul talks about in Romans this battle between the flesh and the spirit, because it's the flesh in us that wants to constantly point our affections at other things and say, oh, maybe this will satisfy me, or maybe I can find identity and purpose in this. And it's the spirit in us that continually needs to be brought back to. Yeah. I love what Augustine said. Augustine's a church father who said that God has made us for himself. He says, you've made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you.
Wow.
Which, I mean, I think that nails it to me.
That
It's
kind of
like
does put it in perspective.
the restlessness we feel, the dissatisfaction, the discontentment it really is all because our hearts are prone to wander, like the old hymn says. They're prone to desire other things.
No, you're right. Well, I think, taking it back to what Paul said about the battle between the flesh and the spirit, I mean, that is a continual battle.
Yeah.
That is one that is very difficult to win. If we look at it from winning, losing, battle type thing, because of our nature always looking to be satisfied. And because in life, satisfaction comes through so many different ways, whether it's pleasurable, visual, all these different things, but it doesn't last. Again, you talk about a great cruise, that was fun. And at the end of the week, it was over.
Like it's over, back to real life.
It's like, I think that we sometimes fight it in our spiritual life as well. Is maybe you had that really high moment. You got saved, you got baptized, you joined the church, whatever, all the different components of any of those that merely drove you to a place. But then it's kind of, that battle comes back about, well, what if? And how about this? And then we see the divisional arguments among so many different things today. And it seems to be ever growing. And we see so much discontentment, even within believers, because, and I think it does go back to that wrestling, because wrestling, again, we can look at that as a competitive nature, but actually wrestling is the one of trying to get dominance over the other is actually more probably of a more accurate thing, because wrestling is a determination thing. I want to win. Yeah. And so if we have these two battles going on, they're fighting each other. They're not just dancing.
Yeah, that's right. And I love that Paul said that, because it means we're not alone.
Yeah.
So it's, it sounds good. It is right. It's true. But that battle is we're not alone. The people of God, the Old Testament, the most consistently repeated command in the Old Testament has to do with remembrance. Yeah. It's like, remember what God has done, which implies that we're going to be prone to forget, and we're going to be prone to, like they did, say, again, well, maybe this thing over here will satisfy. Maybe God can be a love of my life, but not the love of my life. Maybe I can add love for God to these other things that I really love more than that.
And I think that's where we find so many things fall short. Yeah. But for me, where I teach into that is where we forego the relational value of understanding that it's not just mere faith. It's certainly not religion. It's got to be something so much more that there is a true commitment to. Yeah. It's to a degree. I think it is comparative to marriage in the sense of this is just not the lady that shares my house. I mean, we have this. This is a thing. We have this together, and we're one. We're competing. Not competing. We're competing together. We're in this fight together. And I think it goes even back to creation, as God says, it is not good that you be alone. Mm-hmm. While we can look at that certainly from the spousal reference, but He said, I want to be with you. Yeah. Because if you do this alone, it ain't going to work. Yeah. And I think we find that out the hard way most of the time. Yeah, that's very true. And when we look at all the distractions that are around us, in divided loyalties, and can we think sometimes it's and again, I don't mean this critical in the sense of judging someone's intelligence, but do we feel like that sometimes there's a true shallow understanding of all of this, that it's really we haven't really dove into the deep waters enough to understand this, that sometimes it just stops at the surface? Yeah, I think that's definitely right. And I think marriage is a great example of that. It's like the more I know Kristen, the more I love her. Yeah. It's really hard to love something that you don't know, or to love someone that you don't know. I think the same is true with God. We're called to love God, to know God. We tend to take knowing God and make it purely cognitive. I know facts about God, but knowing is a much more experiential relationship that we're called into. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think knowing it goes so much further than maybe. if you think about it from taking a test perspective, I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
Or I know that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's two very, very different things.
Yeah, that's right.
Because knowing it resolves the doubt. And I think when we go back to understanding the application of that particular passage where it says, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, that is the full embodiment of how we're created, mind, spirit, and soul, and body and soul, all this different stuff. And he's saying, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want all of it.
Yeah.
I don't want just part of it. I want it all because that's how I can mold and develop you into who I've called you to be.
Yeah.
But if we're resistant to that, or like you were just saying, if we want to find additions, extra layers, all this other stuff, well, maybe this will make it better, or maybe this will add to it. Sometimes we hinder what's actually really necessary.
Yeah.
Don't we?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, C.S. Lewis was spot on when he said, if I realize that I have desires that nothing in this world will satisfy, I must come to the conclusion that I was created for something outside of this world, know? And I think that's right. And you see it, it's woven into our biology. Dr. Kurt Thompson, Christian psychiatrist, he says that we're all born looking for someone looking for us.
Yep.
An infant who's born. I love the videos of, infants who are born and they take them away and kind of clean them up and they're crying. And then it's like the second they get back to this skin-to-skin contact with the mother.
Yep.
It's like, oh, okay, here's somebody who's looking at me.
Yep.
And I think in that, too, is like the desire that we all have, which is I want to be fully known and fully loved.
Absolutely.
And that only comes from God. Only with God can we be fully, completely, totally known and fully, completely, totally loved.
Yep.
And I think we have distorted views of who God is. I think that gets in the way of loving God as we tend to view him, good or bad, through the lens of our own fathers or through the lens of, what other people say God is like. Mm-hmm. And, and that leads to it goes back to the importance of knowing God as he's revealed himself.
It really does. And I think that's why it has to be a personal thing.
Yeah.
I think to some degree that's what Paul was speaking about when he's talked about work out your own salvation. He wasn't talking about find your way as much as it was find your understanding. Who is God to you?
Yeah.
Because it might not be what you've heard. Because we can hear, I've talked about this before on the show and I've talked about it in other lessons that I teach, but I'm finding, and I'm sure you do too, with the advent of social media now, it can be an okay thing and it can be a horrible thing. It really depends on where you get, because the source of your resource is important.
Yeah.
And so what we find is everybody with a cell phone or a microphone and a Bible now is trying to explain something to you.
Yeah.
Really, really be careful with that.
Yeah.
Because
that's right.
Not only do you get a million different perspectives, but you can really be drawn into, hey, that makes sense. Just be careful. I'm not necessarily pointing out, criticism toward any one particular version or the other, but it's like, if you don't understand anything, be careful of what you're being drawn into. That is why your pursuit of understanding what does this mean to me is so valuable. Wouldn't you think? Yeah,
and I think that's why Luke highlights the Christians in Berea in Acts when he says. He highlights their nobility, and what was noble about them is they received the teaching.
That's right.
With joy, like they're glad, and it says daily searching the scriptures to see if things were so.
That's it.
So that's it. It's like I don't necessarily want to have a critical spirit to everything I'm being taught or everyone who's teaching, but I'm filtering all of that through God as He's revealed Himself in the Word and saying, is that God as He's revealed Himself.
Yeah. Well, because you're right. What you said earlier a while ago is we have so many different, I guess versions would be a correct term of God in the sense of what is presented.
Yeah.
You have He's ready to get you, walking around with a zapper all the time, and then you have, nothing but love, and you've got a million different things in between. But all of that I'm finding more and more is really based on what you are receiving.
Yeah.
And again, if there has to be a balance somewhere in there, because again, Scripture is very, very clear that God corrects those that He loves. So that's a real thing. And Scripture says to parents, if you don't correct your children, you hate them.
Yeah.
So there has to be a corrective nature. Corrective doesn't necessarily mean mean.
Right.
It doesn't mean awful and hateful and vengeful, but it means if I have to say no, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And some people don't want to hear that part.
Yeah.
You know, just like, but just like they have this new thing my wife was telling me about with some of the younger parenting things in the world now. I forget there was a certain terminology for it, but something about passive parenting.
Gentle parenting. Yeah.
And I was like, well, we can't. I was just experiencing this not too long ago with a young person, and they were telling me how their children weren't allowed to visit with other people. And I said, well, why is that? Because that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know? That's a healthy thing. She said, no. They might tell them no. And they get really upset if you tell them no. I'm like, they're 3.
Yeah,
they don't get a vote.
I do too. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, let's be real here.
Yeah.
I don't like to hear no. You don't
Yeah.
no. But sometimes no is the right answer.
Yeah.
Or not right now. Or wait. Or whatever the perspective is there. Because if I care enough about you to tell you the truth, sometimes no is the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that we do have this distorted and all kinds of different views. And again, I think you're right. When we go back to understand what those early ones were accounted for, it's like you're looking.
Yeah.
And that's how you find out anything is if you're only just receiving and say, okay, you could be talking to anything. That's how cults get started.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
yeah, and it's the same, you know, if my knowledge of my wife was only based on what other people said about her, rather than me saying, I actually want to get to know her, I want to have a conversation with her, I want to hear from her, I would have a really faulty and shallow knowledge and relationship with my wife if it was only, you know, the entirety of our relationship is just based on what other people say about you, what they say, you know, is right. So I could know a lot of facts about her, but I wouldn't know her heart. I wouldn't know what motivates her. I wouldn't know, you know, I wouldn't know any of that. No, it's an experiential relationship, which Jesus purchases for us.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? And I think that's so clear is that His desire to walk with us, and you know, and it's all throughout Scripture that we find this relatable, experiential thing to where we can do this together. Yeah. You know, and because again, you're right. If all your information is based on what somebody else says, and it's nothing personal, well, you don't accomplish it, and you don't learn anything by that. I remember seeing a case. We were working court one morning, and then one of the officers on one of the other shifts, he had a court case, and he brought this guy before the judge, and the guy played his case, and he looked at the officer, and he's like, why did you arrest this guy? And he was like, because the sergeant told me to. Yeah. He was like, well, you have no personal investment. He said, I have no idea. Case dismissed. Yeah. It's like, you have to have you have to have something in this. And I think that is absolutely true in our faith walk and our spiritual life, because if we don't have some personal knowledge of understanding this, and it's just, well, you know, grandma told me about Jesus, or the pastor said, those are great, you know, those are great things to hopefully hear and maybe, but what do you know? Yeah. And if that answer is shallow or I use my water reference all the time, but I mean, you know, you're just coming off the cruise and you know, I've got one coming up, and I used to live by the ocean. Man, the surface is one thing, but underneath is a whole different experience, and actually even better. I mean, it's amazing what's underneath the water, and scary. But it's like, that's life. If we're just seeing only the surface, or I heard about Jesus, or I believe in God. Okay, but what does that mean if there's no depth to that? Yeah, I mean, anybody can really. I mean, again, I don't say it to be critical, but anybody can say that. I mean, if we look at it, and it sounds sarcastic, but heck, the devil can say, I believe in God. That don't mean anything. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, James says, like, the demons have really good theology. Yeah, you know, they know right
probably
things
know
about
it way
God.
better than we do.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, so if to say it, but believe it, to say it and live it is two very, very different things. So, friends, we're going to take our first break. We'll be right back with more Coffee with the Pastor. Welcome back, everybody, to Coffee with the Pastor. We're here having a great conversation today about sometimes what is perceived to be as difficulty of the challenge and really the command that God gives us of love God and love one another. We kind of talked extensively in their first section about the difficulty of loving God. And sometimes I think that is based on not knowing God. And I think that's probably the more difficult challenge of that is what have you been told?
Yeah.
Well, because sometimes, and we'll talk about that in this part, because a lot of times it's no different than people. And we talk about loving God and loving others. Sometimes it's difficult for us to love others. But oftentimes, if we're honest, how that equates to loving God is exactly the same thing. It's what I've been told.
Yeah.
That's not a good person.
Yeah.
Or they're this or they're that, or whatever. And so we base a lot of that based on hearsay, based on this and that. When sometimes if we get to know that person, it's like, wait a minute. That's like the greatest person I ever met.
Yeah.
Or hey, that's my best friend, or whatever the case. And so we see, 1 John says, whoever claims to love God yet hates his brother or sister is a liar.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we understanding the necessity that Jesus gives in loving God and loving others, how those are paired together is just that. In order to love one another, you have to learn to love God, which allows you to understand what love really is. And I think we've redefined that word so badly in the world context that loving another we equate totally to emotion, totally to intimacy and all the other things and actions and whatever that goes with that. Whereas it's actually not that at all. Because love is an action. It's an expression of my heart. And so when we're thinking about that, do we see how pride and past hurt and cultural influence, all this stuff, they cause this real disconnect in being able to love one another?
Yeah, they do. I think the simple and complex answer to why are we not able to love others, or why is this so hard, is similar. It's hard to love God because we're humans, and it's really hard to love humans because we're humans and because they're humans. So it's one of the effects of the fall. That rebellion turned us inward on ourselves, and so there's self-centeredness, there's pride, there's the famous line, hurt people hurt people. I think all that's very real.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. But again, I think that we talked about social media and the influence on that. Okay, well, there are people in that world that are called influencers. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
But what we don't stop sometimes to realize, especially those of us that have been around for a while, that's always been a thing. Even long before the internet. I mean, it's always been, whether it was a celebrity, a politician, a world leader of some sort. I mean, Hitler was an influencer, good or bad. I mean, all these different ones. But then we get into the realm of the Oprahs and the Dr. Phils and others. We say influencer because people listen to them.
Yeah, that's right. It's compelling.
We can say the same thing with the church. There are the more well-known names. We don't usually try to use names here, but, the Billy Grahams and whoever that people just automatically recognize. And while that can be a good thing, it can also be a horrible thing because it all depends on what they're saying. But when it comes to loving others, I do think that pride obviously gets in the way of that, hurts and this and that. Well, they said this, or I heard this. But if we can't get beyond that, it's the same thing with being able to have a relationship with God. I remember years ago, I was at a park one morning with my twins, and they were probably about 2 years old. And so walking in, but at that fun toddler stage where they just want to swing and be on the teeter-totter. And, so we're at this little park in the town where I'm working at the time. And there was a lady there that had a couple of kids, very similar age. And so it was one morning, and I'm just there with the girls and just enjoying some time with them. And, just making small talk. I said, good morning, how are you? And she was like, oh, that's, fine, doing good. I said, well, it's a beautiful day, just small talk.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, are you new in town? Because I'd never seen her before, and I'd been there for a while. And she was like, yeah, we just moved here. I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm Pastor Andy. Love to tell you about our place over here, which was in visual sight. You could see it. And I said, we got a great kids program, some great people that help with that, especially the little people here. And instantly she said, oh, I don't go to church. I said, well, that's okay. I said, I'm not forcing my church on you. I'm just letting we have great families here. So we'd love to. And she said, no, I appreciate that. And she said, you seem sincere. She said, but I don't go to church. She said, I got hurt at church one time. I said, well, I get hurt every week.
Yeah, that's right.
I keep going back for some reason.
Yeah.
But again, it's that reputation. It's that what we receive. We go back to the influencers. What are you? So we can see people that we've never met before.
Yeah.
And already determine I don't like them.
Yeah.
Same way with matters of faith. Oh, I've heard about all that. And this is the common thing that I hear. I've heard about, I don't want anything to do with that religion stuff. I'm like, well, Jesus didn't either. It killed him.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's real. So is that still, obviously it's still a real divisive measure between loving one another. That's still a real thing today.
Yeah, I think it is, because it is real. We experience hurt, we experience betrayal, we experience neglect. And we tend to project all those things onto new people to protect ourselves, and it's an understandable response, but it's why it makes it so difficult. It's like, well, no, I've done that in the past. I'm not going to do it again. Right. I'm going to protect myself, which is why, like you said, we've taken love and made it something that not how the Bible talks about it. Yeah. And, the Bible commands us that we're to love one another, forgive one another. Never commands us to trust one another. Right. In fact, Proverbs has a lot to say about the foolishness of trusting somebody who's untrustworthy.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, we can be really manipulative, and it's like, well, no, if you don't trust me, you don't love me. Yeah. It's like, no, I can love people and not trust them.
Absolutely.
John says that Jesus didn't entrust himself to people because he knew what was in people.
Absolutely.
So even there, and we wouldn't take that and then say, well, Jesus, he isn't loving because he didn't trust these people.
That's wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, the center verse of the Bible is Psalm 118 and verse 8. And it says, it is better to put your trust in God, not man.
Yeah.
There's a reason that's the center verse of the Bible.
Yeah, that's right.
The whole applicable nature of that is, because you are what you are, and it's not that we I don't think that we necessarily set out to be that way, but that is kind of part of how we're wired, is that we are out for me.
Yeah,
and we're all that way, whether we enact that or act upon that or whatever. But I've been down that road. You've been down that road. We've had situations where we look back on and realize we got taken advantage of or ripped off, or all the different phraseology we can use. But when we think about that, you're exactly right. When we tend to be very hesitant. Would you say, and I've seen a lot of this lately, would that be fair to say that that's kind of at the core of this move that we see called deconstruction, where people are just saying, I don't want anything to do with that, but they're basing that action on people rather than God? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because what they've seen has caused them to have such a negative reflection of God versus the image of God that they just say, I'm out?
Yeah.
Would that be?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's fair. And I think it's I think it's an understandable response. I sympathize with people who respond that way. And even there, it's like we've lost the ability to we equate love with like, I have to not just agree with everything you think. I have to affirm it. I have to celebrate it. And we've lost the ability to say, no, I can love you and disagree. We can have different opinions. We can have different worldviews, and I can still love you. And I think that's drawn from, at the core, every human being is made in the image of God. Mm-hmm. And so I can say there's somebody who's made in the image of God, who's hurt me or who has differences than I do, different beliefs than I do. And it's not, the disciples try to get around like, well, okay, who's my neighbor? Religious leaders like, tell me who is it? Surely not everybody.
Yeah.
And then Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan where he's saying, no, everybody. That's who you're called to love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that is the answer. And so do we think, and again, this is probably a little bit of a hard, or at least maybe some would think it's a harsh statement, but has the church, the overall body, has our failure to love well damaged the witness to the world?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why I say that. Because Jesus says in John 13, by this everyone will know that you are mine if you love one another.
Mm-hmm.
So have we kind of embarked on this road to where we prioritize being right over being loving?
Yeah. I think
that's a fair question.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, again, it's understandable when people experience hypocrisy, when they experience abuse, when they experience the lack of love. I think it's an understandable response. It's like, okay, and I do think that's where the church hurts this,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the answer isn't to be, I think actually the problem is when we try to be perfect and try to, I'm doing this perfectly. The problem's with you. And it's humility that names, you know what, I am somebody who's saved by Jesus's grace. I'm not yet what he will make me one day, where he'll remove all remaining vestiges of sin. And I think that helps to just acknowledge moments where we have been unloving or where we've experienced things that are outside what Jesus intends for us as we love people.
Oh, no, image is everything.
Yeah.
Because it's just like word of mouth reputation in the business world, okay? Good customer service, good products, good food, good whatever. That spreads far and wide, just as I wouldn't walk across the street to see that, situation or this. All those things play into, and I think we'd be foolish to think that doesn't apply to the church, because it does. I believe, and it's what you just said, we can still have our differences, whether it's our cosmetics, whether it's our presentation, whether it's our music style, whether it's our worship style. We can have all of those differences. I don't think that any of that really makes a hill of beans, to be honest with you. Now, some people, may hear that and they're spinning on their head, with a white knuckle grip on their King James Bible, saying, that I'm so wrong. But we can have those things.
Yeah.
If the core of what we all hold so dear and true is Jesus.
Yeah.
I think Acts teaches that very, very clearly. They set their differences aside. That is the acknowledgement that there were some differences. Yeah. And the thing is, and I was pointing this out the other night because we're on our Wednesday night studies. We're going through the book of Acts. It says they set aside their differences, but it did not say they put them away. Mm-hmm. They still had them.
Yeah.
But they came together in unity over the one thing that mattered.
Yeah.
So Bill and Tom, might, one likes steak and one likes hamburgers. That was okay.
Yeah.
That was okay. They didn't have to have a fist fight about that.
Yeah.
Or tell them, well, don't go talk to Tom because he don't. But I think that we've allowed our differences, whether it's denominational differences or this or that, all these surface level things, to really paint a barrier and a wall to where. I've used this illustration before, but I pastored a church several years ago, and there was another church from a different denomination across the street from us, literally across the street. There was only one thing between us. I reached out for 4 years to that brother. He would not talk to me.
Yeah.
No matter how many times I extended my hand, he was just like, oh, we're just too different. I'm like, but you don't know me. Yeah. We've never had a conversation, But the name on my door and the name on your door are different. Okay.
Yeah.
But what about our hearts? Because I think if you got to know me, you'd see we're probably a whole lot more alike than you realize. But it really bothered me personally until one day I'm working in my office and I just had it on my mind for some reason. I said, why? I almost took it personal, probably too personal, honestly. But why can't this barrier be broken? What is going on there? And I really felt like the Lord impressed on my spirit, go to the front door of the building. I'm like, so I'll go to the front door of the building. He said, look across the street. And I'm looking at that building just across the street. So what's between you? And I got to look. I'm like, oh man, a graveyard. There was just that dead spirit of just that incapacity that we've blinded ourselves with. I can't love you because of X, Y, Z. But what you just said, I had people when I was in Florida it was never a week that went by that people didn't call our office and say, hey, we'd love to come to service on Sunday. Is that okay? That broke my heart.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, why would you ask if it's okay? But the reason was because they'd been told in other places you can't because of where they were at in life right now. Well, I want you to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might not agree with what you're doing. I might not agree with where you are, how you live, or who you live with, or whatever. But until you come and hear the love of God, I can't offer you a solution to maybe where you are. So I think we let stuff get in the way, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And again, it encourages me to know that we're not alone. We come by it honest. If you think about the letters in the New Testament, the entire application of the letters in the New Testament are relational.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
Here's what God has done for you in Christ. When you were an enemy of God, God brought you in. He's made you family. He's made you one. Then the application of that is working out these relational differences.
Yeah.
Between Jews and non-Jewish people. And, even Philippians, the more I study Philippians, the more my personal thought is that the center verse in Philippians is this what feels like throwaway verse where Paul says, I think in Philippians 4, tell these two, I can never pronounce their names, but tell these two ladies to agree in the Lord. And it seems like this throwaway verse, but if you think about it, Paul is, spent 3/4 of the letter saying, this is what God has done for you in Christ. Have this same mentality among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. And then the application of that is, hey, these two ladies who have broken relationship, we don't know why. And I actually think it's helpful that he doesn't tell us exactly what's going on. But it was clear that it was significant enough that Paul was aware of it. He says, now, in light of all that Christ has done, y'all need to agree together in the Lord, So it encourages me to know, we tend to romanticize the early church, and boy, if we could just be like them. And as I read scripture and study the early church, I'm like, oh, they had the same problems we do. It's difficult. It's difficult to love each other, and it's difficult. There is a reality that's like my undealt with, unhealed wounds tend to be the very way that I've been hurt. I tend to hurt other people that way. And it really affects, how we love one another.
Absolutely. Well, I agree with you. When we look back, and I think that holds true to life. Many people will gravitate toward the old phrases and stuff like that. Well, back in the good old days, well, were they all good?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a friend of mine. He was being interviewed for a documentary in his industry that he worked in for a long time. And his name was Bill. And they said, well, Bill, tell us about the good old days. And the very first comment, he said, well, they weren't all good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember my dad telling me that he was in the military. And then when I was in the military, getting close to getting out, he told me, you need to keep some sort of a journal or write down the experiences you have, because it's like the further you get away from it, the more you'll only remember the good stuff.
Yep.
And you'll kind of think, wow, those were the good old days. Why did I get out? Why am I not there? And it's the same with history too. We romanticize it. We see it through rose-colored lenses.
Yep.
And we don't realize that the people of God, throughout the history of the people of God, have really struggled with this.
Very much
because they're selfish like we are. And
absolutely. I love what you said. Paul reminded people that often, and I love that. I think it's in 1 Corinthians or wherever, but he addresses this one body. He says, have you found a new Jesus? What happened to what we've been doing? Well, I fast forward that to now, and it's like, some places have found a new one because they've created one that is assimilating with what they want it to mean versus what it actually says. And that can be problematic too, because then we're leading people down the wrong road to where they don't have the right conclusion in something, because oftentimes it's just like recreating history. We want to do that and paint, like you said, rose-colored glasses and all this other stuff. It was all great, when the truth of no, it wasn't. And I think we should be honest about that. That's not being critical. That's just being true.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's okay to admit that, because that's how you learn. I mean, for me, that's how we grow. It's okay. Yeah, it was okay here, but it's not bad now. You know, and some people have become so critical of well, you know, this modern, this and modern. Well, you know, some modern things are good. I like air conditioning.
Yeah, me too. Right now, especially. Yeah.
Know, I remember growing up, you know, in cars that you had the roll down windows by the cranks and AM radio, and you know, okay, that was what it was back then.
Yeah.
But now it's better. I don't decry that. I like it.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, I think all of this is like we've got to acknowledge that we're not able to do this without God's help. You know, we need the Spirit of God to form us, shape us, reform us, renew us. That's why in our membership covenant, you know, the things that members of the church commit to one another, every statement is preceded by, with God's help and by His grace, Absolutely. I will. You know, so it just communicates we're not going to do this We're not going to do this perfectly.
No,
very much we're going to do it imperfectly, and it should not go without saying that I am not able to love others like I love myself without the Lord's help.
Absolutely. No, and I believe that with all my heart. I'm doing a daily video teaching right now on the word purpose, and Jesus gives us that, and very clearly, Matthew said, "You are the light of the world." That's your purpose.
Yeah,
that's it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You know, and so many people struggle and say, "Well, I don't have any." No, you do.
Yeah,
you don't enact it. You don't. You know, and because we've been convinced by some that, well, you can't, or this or that. Well, but that's not what the Lord said. So we'll go on our next break with that, and we'll be right back with the last part of Coffee with the Pastor. Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you with us today. We're going to wrap up things here at the Coffee with the Pastor. We're talking with Pastor John about the difficulty of loving God and loving one another. We hear that as our core principle, our core. You know, Jesus said, hang everything on these two things, but they might be the two things that we wrestle with the most. Do we think that it would be, again, fair statement to say that we don't truly understand what real love is? Do we wrestle with that? Because, again, 1 Corinthians says love is patient. Love is kind. Are we more in love with the idea of love than the sacrifice it requires?
Yeah, that's right. I think we want... we're just wired to want the path of least resistance, you know, so I want to do what's easy for me, but... You know, 1 Corinthians 13, like you're talking about me, it lays, love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. It's not, all of those passages, you know, they sound really good at a wedding, but if you think about each of those statements, like this is really difficult because you think about people that you're like, well, love keeps no record of wrongs, except that person, you know, has really wronged me in a significant way. So wisdom would say I need to keep a record of those wrongs, kind of hold them over their heads. So I think, again, we've got to continue to, like Paul talks about in Philippians 2, come back to Christ's example of love, and to name it with honesty and courage where we fall short of that.
I think so. I think that's almost comparative to forgiveness.
Yeah.
With the but.
Yeah.
You know, I forgive you, but God didn't say that. He didn't say, he said you're forgiven. Go.
Yeah.
And I think that we struggle with that. And I think love is the thing. Well, I love you, but the but can't be there.
Yeah.
If it's in totality of where our heart is at, because because I'm holding on to something. Then I think it's like when Peter, you know, comes to Jesus and said, well, how many times should I forgive my brother? You know, 7 times. He's kind of like, look at me.
Yeah,
I'm
that's right.
adding a little bit. Look at how cool I am. And Jesus like, no, 70 times. He wasn't giving him a math figure. He was saying, how many times have I forgiven you?
Yeah, that's right.
That's it. He's like, I mean, that is something that again, I think we miss in the willingness or desire to explain away everything. You're right. We're going to have things in this life in particular dealing with other people that are not going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
That's just real.
Yeah.
Okay, people are going to do you wrong. People are going to lie, cheat, steal, whatever. We're not writing that off as that it's insignificant or that it doesn't matter, because it will always matter. But our response to it is where our true responsibility is, because that is a reflection of what our heart is to Christ. And I think that we miss that, because going back to understanding love, we talked about that in the first segment. We've redefined that to be an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that happen? Where did we change? Where did that? You know, I mean, and that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
But it's like that still really is a real hindrance in society. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think again it goes back to the fall in the garden. Adam and Eve experienced perfect love with God and perfect love with one another. There's sin, there's rebellion. Part of the consequence of that is there's actually enmity and anguish and separation between not just us and God, but one another. Mm-hmm. And
because this first statement was, that woman.
That's right. It's like, it wasn't me. It was her. This is, without her, this wouldn't have happened. Which is crazy, because it says, I think I always pictured Adam like he's off, naming more animals or gardening or something. He just walks up and sees Eve's eating fruit and is like, "What'd you do?" But the Bible says he's right there. Right he's right there watching it. Yeah. And so love in that moment would have been him crushing the head of the serpent and saying no.
100%.
He's passive and unloving towards Eve and just kind of allows this to happen. And since then, there's that same kind of fractured relationship, not just between us and God, but between me and fellow men and women.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that's a great example, because we still fight that. Mm-hmm. We still fight that today, in that nature of, well, I don't want to say anything. Well, sometimes you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, there's a differentiation in your opinion and something that is necessity. And in that particular case, if I'm witnessing you doing something that is going to not just harm you, but harm multiple people, like, don't strike that match in front of that oxygen tank. We're going to blow up half I'm going to say something. Yeah. Because if I don't, that's on me.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same way when we're watching brothers and sisters fall apart and life is going upside down, and we just sit there. When we could step in, but well, they did this and they deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but does that erase your responsibility?
Yeah, that's right. If I got what I desered, I wouldn't like it very much.
None of us would. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like, well, they're this or they did that. Okay, but let's again. I just finished writing a message on the woman brought before Jesus in the temple while he's teaching. That the Pharisees said she had committed adultery. Well, there's so many parts of that story. We don't have the time to go into all of it. But at the end of the day, Jesus did not refute their request that the law commanded the stoning, but rather he said, paraphrasing, but basically he said, okay, well, before you toss that, let's make sure that your record's clean too.
Yeah,
and they're like,
that's right.
Oh, I didn't think about that part. Well, that counts too, because because now you're making an accusation that is requesting and requiring the life of somebody. Yeah. Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal. I remember when I was on the road, man, and again, you haven't served in the military. I was in police work. If you've never been there, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the person standing in front of you, and you have the opportunity, availability, and maybe even the necessity in some degrees to take that life. Mm. Man, that is not a light.
Yeah.
That is not a light thing.
Yeah,
and I know every chance that was presented for me in that, all I could race through my mind at that time was, can I do this? Mm. Am I in danger? What is this? What is the fallout of all this? Not that blurring of reality, or not that pause moment long enough to get hurt, but rather that instant, like, what? That's a real thing, because that comes with it comes with consequences. Where is this placing me? And I think with our relationship with the Lord, it's the same thing. How am I living that out?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the church, the challenge, we go back to this. What is the picture that people see? Because oftentimes, and sadly, I think that the outside looking in people, either the skeptic, the scoffer, the non-believer, the maybe riding the fence kind of person, the imagery that they see is what paints the picture of whether they want to come in the door or not.
Yeah.
And if they only hear of all the arguments and all the, raucous committee meetings and all the different stuff that are going on, they're probably like, nah, I'll pass.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of responsibility does fall on the church.
Yeah, it does.
Do.
It does. And, you brought up earlier, it's so true. Jesus says the watching world will know that we're his by how we love one another, which is so interesting because I think logically I would say surely what Jesus meant was by how we love them. Mm-hmm. But he says, no, it's how you love one another. They ought to be able to look in and say, that's a counter, the way that you guys love one another and speak the truth in love and sit in the tension of, love isn't primarily an emotional thing. It's not I agree with everything or I never tell you, you're wrong or enact any kind of discipline or punishment or anything like that. But he says, the world should look in and say there's something different over there.
Absolutely.
And I think far too often the world looks in and says, you guys don't like each other. It's like I can go to work throughout the week and be with people that I don't like. Why would I want that? That's no different. Or I think oftentimes it's worse than what I experience in relationships in the world.
I absolutely believe that because, and I think the reason that it's worse is because it's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
It's done under a falsehood because you have this group of people under the same roof that have a claim to a title, be it Christian believer or whatever word you want to use, but yet still nobody believes it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody believes it because they watch. I remember, and one of the most painful experiences I've ever had in ministry. We always have our ups and downs and disappointments and whatever, but we were pastoring a church for a very, very short season, the shortest season of my entire career, because God revealed it to me very, very quickly. It was beyond my capacity to heal what we were in.
Yeah.
And what was revealed to me was, okay, now we can look at this comically, but it wasn't. You walk into a building, you're the pastor, you're sitting, or you're standing on the pulpit, and you're looking at your congregation, and there's literal left and right, okay? And there's literal people sitting on left and literal people sitting on the right. And it's not because of the spacing of the seats. It's because they truly do not like each other.
Yeah.
They don't speak to each other. They don't have anything to do with each other. They don't fellowship together. They just happen to be members of that particular thing and have that mentality. This is my church and I'll wait you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was gross.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, what are we doing? And when I addressed it as the leader, as the pastor, as an authority, like, what are you doing? This is so not just we can jump all over the ungodly and this and that, but this is so unrepresentative of what Christ calls us to be. They're like, it's always been this way and it always will be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So
so
it's time for me to go.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's right. You have Jesus in Revelation saying to the church at Ephesus, you need to return to your first love.
Yeah.
And he highlights these are things that you're doing well, but you need to return to your first love or I'm going to remove your lampstand. And the thing that's, we don't know exactly what happens, but it would seem from church history that the church in Ephesus you don't really hear about it or from it anymore. No. It would seem that they didn't heed Jesus's warning.
I would agree. I think, in fact, I think we could see almost, if we see the picture of Ephesus to Laodicea, I think it's actually an evolution of, if you don't return, this is where you end up. Mm-hmm. Because you don't return to your first love, so I'm going to take away your effectiveness. But when you leave something, you always replace it with something else. By Laodicea, I don't need anything. I got it all figured out. Why? Because you filled in all the gaps with everything else. You've got your own version of Jesus. You got your own this, your own that. And now the Lord is saying, you say that you have need of nothing. That includes me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we see in the mindset of even in the life of an individual. Well, I'm going to leave this. Okay, whether it's your wife or whether it's what doesn't matter, but I'm going to replace it with all this other stuff to the point to where now I've developed and come to a place to where I got it.
Yeah.
But that's pride.
Yeah,
That's arrogance, which goes before the fall. We could tie it all together, and we could be preaching here in a minute. But it's like, but that's how it works. And I think that's just a beautiful picture of exactly what we're talking about. How do we get there? It's because we begin developing. We're going to do it our way. But God never said do it your way. He said do it my way.
Yeah, yeah, that's
and
right.
I think that's important. Well, man, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Great.
Really great.
Tell everybody about Frontline, man. What's going on?
Yeah, Frontline. We gather over by Jack Brett High School in Fayetteville, over there on Camden Road. They're doing road construction out there, and
it's a nightmare.
I know, really. It's so funny. I
live off Camden, man.
Yeah, it's same. I live like a minute and a half from the church, and my minute and a half commute is turned into about a 10 or 15 minute commute now. Yeah, it's funny. I used to live in Texas, and it seems like they were building roads overnight, and moves pretty slow here. So, yeah, we meet over there. We gather on Sundays at 9 and 11, scatter during the week. We've got small groups that kind of meet all over Fayetteville, Rayford, Hope Mills, some on Fort Bragg. And, if you don't have a church family, we'd love to see you there. You know, we like to say that each of you has a story. It matters to God, and it really matters to us.
That's great. Well, I encourage everybody, if you're over on that side of town, go by and see Pastor John over at Frontline. You will be blessed. I believe that with all my heart. So, hey guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank our guests for being with us today. To all of our fellow pastors out there, what Jesus asked of us is simple. Sometimes we complicate it, and we add a lot to it. But if we just keep watching him, and he said, follow me. We'll see. And I just pray that we lead people in that way. Again, thanks for tuning in. Lord willing, we'll be back next week with another great conversation about things that matter. Until then, blessings to all of you. I am your host, Pastor Andy. This is Coffee with the Pastor, where Jesus is good all the way to the last one.
You've been listening to Coffee with the Pastor with your host, Andy McDaniel. Connect and learn more when you visit the podcast page at Christian1057.com. And join us each week for Coffee with the Pastor on Christian 105.7.